Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
The number of people believed to have died in the Grenfell Tower disaster in West London has risen to 79. The Metropolitan Police have warned that they may never be able to identify all those who died. As our home editor Mark Easton reports, a minute's silence for the dead was observed at 11 o'clock this morning right across the UK.
There have been too many days like this. The firefighters of Red Watch, first on the scene last Wednesday, linking arms with others across the United Kingdom, the country pausing to reflect on the Grenfell Tower tragedy, a nation once again standing silently united in grief.
Pray! Dismiss!
And then, for Red Watch, it was back to their harrowing work in the tower, as the official count of those now presumed to have died in the fire rose to 79. Police today confirmed that 24-year-old Khadija Say, 65-year-old Tony Disson and 39-year-old Abulfaz Ibrahim were among the victims. This was the reaction of firefighters when they raced to the scene last Wednesday morning.
How was that possible? It jumped up all the way along the flats.
Like so many, disbelieving at the scale and ferocity of the blaze.
I've investigated major crime for most of my service, and I've seen some terrible things, but I don't think anything prepared me for what I was going to see when I was in there.
The Grenfell Fire Response Team, including the Red Cross, London Boroughs and Whitehall departments, is now providing financial, physical and psychological support to more than 2,000 people. Over £200,000 in aid has been given out. Hotels and estate agents are helping find temporary beds and permanent homes. But why did it take so long?
It's almost as though you've arrived 3 days too late.
Resilience arrangements were not invoked by the Royal Borough of Kensington Chelsea until Friday afternoon.
Why not?
At that point, that's when we can step in.
Why didn't they ask for help earlier?
That is obviously something that people would want to look to see why.
Some residents from evacuated homes next door to Grenfell Tower say they've been told their only option is to return to the flats. One resident, Joe Delaney, says a number of his neighbours are now in homes without hot water and other amenities.
Without hot water and with water coming from a tank that's under that charred husk of a tower, yes, that's where we're being asked to live at the moment.
The authorities say no one's been forced to move back.
The blackened shell of Grenfell Tower stands against the clear blue sky of a summer's day and seems to challenge all those who stand in its shadow to demand answers and to demand justice for the scores of people we now know lost their lives here.
But what does justice mean? With focus on the cladding used at Grenfell Tower, the government's asked councils and housing associations to check immediately whether tower blocks in their areas use the same material. A criminal investigation is underway, with Scotland Yard promising to go wherever the evidence takes them.
Where offences have been committed, I will do everything within my gift to ensure that those responsible are brought to justice.
This evening, a silent protest in the shadow of Grenfell Tower from a community that says it hasn't been listened to for far too long. Mark Easton, BBC News, North Kensington.
The government has begun making emergency fund payments to those made homeless by the fire. Ministers say every surviving family will get £500 in cash and £5,000 paid into their bank. Our special correspondent Lucy Manning reports on the impact of the relief effort and the continuing search for survivors.
She is called Firdaus, just 12 years old, but those who know her say she's a remarkable young woman. Firdaus starred in a comic relief debate just 2 months ago.
Unrealistically think that poverty is just going to disappear like this. But as Bill Gates said, we have to raise the bar.
Now Firdaus, her 6-year-old brother, 13-year-old brother and parents are feared to have been killed in the fire.
There's no doubt that she and the other children all had wonderful, wonderful futures.
Sean and Hidil took the children away on activity trips and ran after-school clubs for them.
Very sensible, always asking intelligent questions, and she was also very inquisitive. She had this thirst for knowledge. She was always learning and teaching the younger children. Yakia, he was the oldest child, and he absolutely loved football. You know, always that making jokes, had a brilliant sense of humour. Two really, really beautiful souls. The younger child, Jakob, he was just a bundle of energy.
So many children lost in this community. A community still struggling to get all the help that it needs.
Sure, all right, okay.
Miguel Alves lived on the 13th floor of Grenfell. Now his home is a room on the 14th floor of a hotel with his wife and 2 children.
They promised me that they will do something in the next 3-4 weeks.
So you think you'll be in a hotel for 3 to 4 weeks?
I really don't know, but I expect that, yes.
So you had to ask the council for help with housing?
Yes.
They didn't come and offer you?
No, nobody contacted me.
And has anybody contacted you from the council about help?
I mean, no. I mean, I have to go and do myself.
Miguel's family did receive £500 from them yesterday, but Miguel is struggling to get new documents and needs his family's cars stuck by the tower block. And the youngest need help too. Ryan and Tina write a message for 6-year-old Jakob, who was their friend. Their mum tells me many of the children here will need support. Lucy Manning, BBC News, West London.
Well, tonight details are emerging about warnings to government about fire safety and regulations. Our special correspondent Richard Bilton joins me. So the accusation is that there were many warnings, Richard, but that nothing was done.
Yeah, we've seen letters, I have them here, that show the government was given plenty of warnings that fire safety in tower blocks, it just wasn't good enough, and experts were predicting that there could be a disaster, and they did that for years. Now, it follows a fatal fire in 2009 in South London. There were recommendations designed to keep people safe. Now, 4 years later, 2013, the government said there'd be a review of fire regulations, but nothing has been published. So that brings us up to now, and we've seen these letters, and they're from the Parliamentary Fire Safety Group. Now, they're informed by experts. These letters were sent over a long period of time, and there's a dozen of them, and they are full of warnings. They say, for example, 2 years ago, that the government could not afford to wait for another tragedy, and just 2 months ago, these letters warn it is now time to listen. Now, over the period of time that these letters were sent, they went to 4 government ministers, but the fire regulations were never tightened. When we spoke to the government today, they said there is no timetable for a review, even now, of these fire regulations.
Richard, thank you very much. Thank you.
The Prime Minister Theresa May today praised the resolve of Londoners who suffered 2 other terror attacks and the Grenfell Tower disaster. This morning, as police confirmed at least 79 people had died in the tower block fire, the country paused to pay silent tribute. In emotional scenes, survivors and locals hugged firefighters. Paul Davis reports.
On the stroke of 11, in the shadow of tragedy, a moment of shared humanity. A world still reeling from all it's had to deal with seemed to stop, to pay respect to those who've perished. The emergency teams still searching for the missing briefly paused to join friends and relatives of those for whom hope has now slipped away. Scenes repeated at centres where the survivors of Grenfell Tower are being looked after, and at the headquarters of a fire brigade for whom this tragedy has become personal as well as the job they must do. When the silence stopped, residents and volunteers showed their appreciation of those who would soon be going back into that building.
It's just about everyone getting together and supporting everyone the best they can.
Back to work with tears in their eyes, not for the first time during these most challenging of days. This is what they're dealing with. Video filmed by the fire crews shows what an inferno does to a place where once families lived. Barely recognisable, this was once a bed. Images like these explain a death toll that continues to rise. 79 victims, the latest figure. It will almost certainly be more. And the search of this devastated building is having an impact on those who must do it.
I've investigated major crime for most of my service, and I've seen some terrible things, but I don't think anything prepared me for what I was going to see when I was in there.
Emergency teams are now searching the last areas where people gathered before any hope of rescue disappeared. Paul Davis, ITV News.
Well, survivors of the fire say they are still facing hardship, despite assurances that the authorities are doing everything they can. Angus Walker spoke to one family who lost everything. They say they're getting very little money or help.
The launch today of the Justice for Grenfell campaign. For survivors and the relatives of victims, the first steps in the search for answers, as they also struggle to get the help they need. 6 days on, and Siar Naqshbandi and his family are homeless. He says the council's response has been hopeless.
We are all in a hotel, small rooms, no fridge, no storage.
This is the video he filmed of his home being destroyed, his neighbours losing their lives.
It's very, very difficult for us because we're not getting enough information. Where are the help available?
The council told him to come and collect £500 cash for his family, but the payment was delayed.
When I got there, they said to me, give us about 15 minutes, we'll get the cash to you now. After 15, 20 minutes, I waited, they said we have run out of cash.
He says the council then sent one £20 note in an envelope in a taxi to his hotel.
When you go to them, it's not helpful. They bring you a large pen and paper that tells you what's your need. We have lost our house. Why do we need to write down what we have lost? What more reason they want? We have lost everything we had.
With a family of 7, 2 eventual payments of £500 haven't covered the costs of starting again. There's little left. He's actually overdrawn. On the day, a minute's silence was held to remember the dead. The survivors are kept waiting to hear how they can rebuild their lives. Angus Walker, ITV News, North Kensington.
Yes, I'm at Grenfell Tower. Here today at 11 o'clock, there was a minute's silence for the victims of the fire. Police today say the death toll stands at 79, but expectations are that it will rise higher, which doesn't surprise any of the community here. Meanwhile, though, there is still anger here at the response of the authorities on the ground. When words fail, a minute's silence across the country. But it's in the shadow of the tower itself that the pain is greatest. At Holland Park Comprehensive, a short drive away, here it's personal too. Year 11 pupil Nahuda El Wahab has been missing since the fire, along with her brother Yasin and their neighbour Mariam El Gwabri, both former pupils at the school.
Nahuda was a beautifully diligent girl, and I followed her progress closely because she was taught English by one of the school's deputy heads. So for the last 3 years I have witnessed her work prosper, develop, repeat itself, and I was looking forward to a student achieving one of the highest grades at GCSE this summer in her English in particular.
The death toll has reached 79, with no expectation that it will stop there. At a press conference today, the police commander in charge said all the services were doing everything possible to identify victims, but warned again of the enormous challenge they face.
I've investigated major crime for most of my service, and I've seen some terrible things, but I don't think anything prepared me for what I was going to see when I was in there.
At least 5, minimum 5. I know many more people. I can't even begin to tell you how many people we pass and say hello to downstairs.
Benazir Lashari has just been allowed to return to her flat below the tower, where she watched helplessly as the fire took hold. A local councillor herself, she says she's been appalled by the slow response of all the authorities.
The council had been absent Today, the TMO have knocked on our doors. 5 days too late, but they're here, and they've reassured us they've done toxicity tests. I just think it's too slow. I mean, how come aid and things were here within hours of this happening? Within hours, we were flooded by people with donations and with things, and even I had somebody bring clothes for my children because we ran away with no clothes, and somebody bought clothes for my children to where I was staying. That's how beautiful the donations have been. But the TMO, for them to come up 5 days too late, it's too late.
The newly formed Grenfell Fire Response Team, which includes councils from across the capital, police and the Red Cross, acknowledged today that the initial response wasn't good enough, but said their focus now is on making sure everyone affected is looked after. We were told families were now being given the first of the government's emergency payments, and work was ongoing to rehouse residents. This afternoon, people took to the streets for a silent march led by survivors and families. While practical help may now be coming through, their calls for justice may take longer to answer. So there are signs of some improvement. As I said in the piece, the newly formed Grenfell Response Team, made up rather pointedly of lots of councils outside of the borough of Kensington and Chelsea, seem to be getting things moving a little more quickly. People are getting the first of the emergency payments. And on the critical issue of rehousing, we've been told by the team that 115 households who were displaced by the fire have been offered hotel placements. Around 40 assessments for permanent housing were due to take place and be finished by the end of today. This will not be an easy task in a borough that has a chronic shortage of social housing, and where even if you're on the high priority list, you may wait 5 years or more for a home.
As we heard earlier, at least 79 people are now known to have died in last week's fire. For those living through these dark days just 7 miles from here, their voices, their anguish, their thoughts are on display right across North Kensington. I spent this morning among them. The epicentre of the grief, death, disruption is inevitably Grenfell Tower itself. Stuck to every stickable structure, though, post boxes, lamp post, walls. The clouds of post-its describe the ripples of this disaster, stretching right across the community. People were taught, nursed, cleaned for, tended by people who lived in the tower and are now presumed dead. This is 12-year-old Fatawa, missing. 3 months ago, I awarded her a prize in a debate mate competition, a school's debating thing. Bill Gates was present, and she won the best floor speech. She was perfectly brilliant, and she's missing. As the word missing turns to the unwritten word dead, people yearn to express themselves. Impromptu memorials spring up everywhere.
Nadia was my daughter's teaching assistant. This is Nadia.
Yes.
And this is her whole family.
That's her husband?
Yeah, that's her husband and three children.
Yeah.
And she also had either it was her own mother or her mother-in-law. So that's 6 people just from her family. And they lived on the 22nd. Yeah. All our children. The first day my child went back to school, one picture said I loved, because he goes, Mummy, you've been crying all day. And the second one was nothing else on the page, just a tower block with fire coming out of it.
The frustration and the lack of coordination and information and the scale of the tragedy are offset by the artwork of the people who wait, knowing the worst but waiting to hear it from someone, anyone, who knows. Julia lives in the walkway of low housing at the bottom of Grenfell Tower itself. So you were evacuated?
Yes, we were, and at present we are back in, but no one officially has made any contacts, especially with my family. Some people have had texts, but still not officially sort of owning up and saying, like, we have no hot water, we have no gas. Mm-hmm. We don't know, the toxicity levels are, like, we've had nothing in that regard to say it's safe, pollution-wise. And we're living this, and in comparison to our friends that have died or the families, it's nothing what we're living right now, but this is happening as well, and we feel the need to have this part of it out just to underline the fact that how non-people we are to them.
Above all, the children are expressing themselves. Vast stretches at their own view of what has happened. Community united in pain, and this extraordinary image here, and then contrasting love, community, not your fault. Again, the inferno. And something optimistic, the circle of life will always continue. And this extraordinary, really beautiful one, after a fire, the rainbow comes out. Broken, but united with my neighbours. And finally, the rainbow. Stand strong and love each other. Oh, and another rainbow here too.
John there on a community in mourning. Well, our science editor Tom Clark has more on the Grenfell Tower tragedy now. Tom, tell us.
Well, you'll remember, Kathy, that while the tragedy was still unfolding at Grenfell Tower, there was speculation that cladding on the outside of the building may have been one of the main reasons the fire spread so quickly. No concrete evidence at this stage, but an indication it was. Since then, councils up and down the country have been going through their housing stock to establish if they share any common features with the cladding on the outside of Grenfell Tower, in case that was the case. Now, I've been in touch with as many councils as I can across the London area, who were supplied by either the same contractors or the suppliers to other contractors of the same materials that supplied Grenfell Tower. Now, tonight we spoke with Barnet Council, who deserves some credit here, I think, for being clearly the most proactive on all of this, because based on inspections carried out just today, they have confirmed that 3 of their 23 tower blocks have been clad with the same specific type of plastic, aluminium composite outer cladding that was on Grenfell Tower, called Rainobond PE. That's under the most scrutiny following the Grenfell fire. Now, the towers in question are 15-storey towers called Granville Point, Harpenmead Point and Templewood Point in North London. Now, I really must stress at this stage, there is no indication that these buildings are not fire safe. If for no other reason that although the outer cladding is the same as at Grenfell Tower, beneath that there's an entirely mineral, inflammable, totally non-flammable insulation layer. There are also these fire blocks in place, and there's some speculation they weren't there on Grenfell Tower. But experts in fire protection have been warning there's no reason why these polymer plastic-based cladding systems should be on high-rise buildings.
I know it's hard to tell, but from your ring round, is Barnet likely to be the only other one?
Absolutely not. As I said, lots of councils up and down the country are trying to do that. The Department of Communities, local government are trying to coordinate that effort to review housing stock. What action will be taken next depends on that much, much wider audit. But I think I must just reiterate at this stage, there is no indication yet that this building's unsafe, but it does have that same cladding.
Tom, thank you very much.